Hey, so a couple weeks ago, a friend sent me a text that included a new art project that's going up in the south side of Chicago. It's by
Yeah, I remember.
it's
Yeah.
by an artist named Tonika Johnson. It's called
Mhm.
Inequity for Sale. And right, I immediately forwarded it to you.
Yeah. It's basically calling out how Black people had their homes stolen from them legally through these predatory lending schemes back in the day.
Yeah, these landmarks, they're going to go in front of 10 or 15 houses on the south side that have been legally stolen, as the sign says. Yeah, and it just
Yep.
felt so perfect for us. It's art, but it's art that exposes injustice. It's art that's political. It's art that's demanding change. I immediately wanted to talk about this.
Let's do it. I'm Khalil Gibran Muhammad.
And I'm Ben Austen. We're two best friends.
One Black.
One white.
I'm a historian.
And I'm a journalist.
This is Some of My Best Friends Are.
In this show, we wrestle with the challenges
and the absurdities
in a deeply divided and unequal country.
And in this episode, we're going to learn from two amazing artists who challenge us to see the world as it is.
Yeah, their art is both in museums and also in the streets of Chicago.
Yep, we're going to art school, folks.
Let's go. Get your palette.
Yeah, so you met up with Tonika, right?
Yeah. To learn more about her work, to learn more about Inequity for Sale, I went to her home a couple weekends ago, and we drove around the neighborhood.
Yeah, she lives in Inglewood, right?
Yeah, she lives in Englewood on the south side of Chicago, which is where these signs, these placards are going to go as well.
Follow me so you can, unless you want to ride in my car together.
Tonika is amazing. She's so generous to do this.
We'll go to 7257.
She has this humility that I think actually disguises just sort of how badass she is and the amazingness of her work.
Yeah, because she's been actually doing a lot of other activities, including organizing in that same community.
Exactly. She's a community organizer. She's a photographer. She's done other art projects that have really captured my attention. And, this neighborhood of Englewood, where she lives and works, is a really important one as well.
I mean, it's been kind of at the center of how Chicago is described as a violent city, precisely because of the level of community violence in Inglewood in particular.
Yeah. In an earlier episode, you and I talked about Cabrini Green, this public housing development being sort of like this mythological place. And Englewood has sort of filled that void in Chicago. It sort of exists in this realm of like horror stories.
Yeah, it's also not that far from where we grew up. I mean, It's just a little bit west of where we grew up.
Yeah, a little west, a little bit south. It was a 10-minute drive from my place.
But it might as well be light years away because it's a community that's been devastated by loss, by divestment.
We stop on one of these streets, and it's a block that has 3 of these homes that were sold on land sale contracts. And listen, man, there's like an empty lot. There's a boarded up home. There's a really nice home that has a fence and being taken care of. Next to it is a vacant lot. There's a boarded up home. And so
It's just crazy. It's just crazy in terms of like lot by lot what's going on.
Yeah, you see the devastation. You see the abandonment. You see really the absence of people too. Because, the population in Englewood has dropped from something like 97,000 in the 1960s to 24,000 today. So there's been black flight from this community. And you see it there too.
This home right here, this burnt up one, that's a land sale contract home. This is actually one that's going to be in the project as well.
So the project that she's referring to there, she's putting up these landmarks in the community, in the neighborhood. She's going to start with about 10 of them or 15 of them. And, there are these signs, they're yellow in this way, bright yellow. And she said it's supposed to be a caution sign. It's like the yellow of a caution sign. And they say this home at 6823 South Aberdeen was legally stolen from Black couple Mr. and Mrs. James and Lula Malone on October 30th, 1963 in a widespread land sale contract scam.
Yeah, that's just so powerful. And, these land sale contract scams were a predatory market set up to target Black people by speculators who basically sold them homes on a layaway plan. Literally, like they were set up to make payments. They never earned equity in the home until the final payment was made. And often these land speculators who were involved in this scheme would deliberately sabotage Black people by making payments disappear or pretending as if they didn't receive them. And so lots of people lost their homes this way, and yet the speculators made thousands and thousands of dollars on Black people.
Yeah, what makes Inequity for Sale so amazing is that Tonika researches these homes. She finds who lived there and when their homes were stolen from them.
So I was just looking at that data set and I was like, they're all around me. That's crazy. And so now that you see the block that I was living on, it was so many vacant homes.
This is the data that she's talking about, that there was a Duke study originally. I think it was in 2018. It was called The Plunder of Black Wealth in Chicago.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Because one of the major guys is a reparations scholar named Sandy Darity at Duke. Yes, I remember that.
And so they started looking into the effects of these land sale contracts. And, Tonika got interested in this, and she asked whether she could actually see the homes.
The specific data to track it right down to the street level.
And they were like, yeah. And so she is working with researchers and others to find these. And now they've put together this list, a map that shows each of the homes. And so we're just driving around and she's like, there's 5 on this block, there's 3 on this block, a couple blocks over. And it seems like they're in clusters, but they're also all over the place.
Okay.
So in the 1950s and the 1960s in particular, Black people could not get mortgages. They couldn't get federally backed mortgages.
Yeah, exactly. And you know why? Because in the 1930s, when the federal government decided to support home ownership because of the Great Depression, homes weren't being built, there was a massive housing shortage, the government basically took the discrimination in the private market that had already existed and enshrined it in new federal policy. White people got to buy homes because the federal government said Black people were too much of a risk in most places, and therefore they used this color-coded scheme where red was used as the designation for Black people in the areas of the city where they live, like the whole south side of segregated Chicago. Like if you look at a historical map, it's redlined.
Yeah, so the federal government and then banks, lenders are justifying this by saying this is a risky loan. And it's essentially entire Black communities that you pointed out.
People often think about this era of redlining or now land sale contracts as a predatory lending moment in a little bit of abstraction, right? But one of the things that the Duke study pointed out is that $4 billion was plundered from the Black
with
community.
a B. Billion.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said $4 billion, right?
Yeah, I wanted other people to hear that. Like how much money.
No, it's crazy, right? So $4 billion is taken out of the Black community. Talk about theft over a 20-year period, 2 decades in the 50s and 60s.
And so, the estimates are that upwards of 75% of all homes purchased by Black people in Chicago were on land sale contracts. Purchased in quotes because you're not really purchasing it.
The reason that I picked this specific block is so people can see how it changed this block today. Like literally an abandoned home and 2 vacant lots are on this block because of that period. And having vacant lots and abandoned homes on your block depreciates the value of the people who live here.
And now these communities where there's so much abandonment and vacant lots are often, understood by the outside world as the evidence of Black pathology and dysfunction, and Black people don't care about their neighborhoods. And that's what's so powerful, not only about the data set, but also Tonika bringing this story to life in this art project.
Yeah, and driving around with her, it was unmistakable.
What makes crime even profitable is when you have an environment where you don't have traffic, where you don't have people watching you. That's a key to a successful crime business. If you don't have any eyes on you, then that means you could do whatever it is you're doing. And these blocks that don't have homes lived in and have vacant lots, that's the perfect scene for anybody who's crime involved.
Yeah, so this art project, Inequity for Sale, is fascinating, and I wish I were there with you in Tonika. But looking at one of the signs and seeing up close, I mean, she's calling out, one, that it's legal, this predatory land sale scam, like people could do this legally, but she calls it a crime, and she wants people to know that a crime happened here and no one has been punished for it.
And she said that they're painted bright yellow, which isn't a typical color for a landmark. She said it alerts you to danger. That's what it typically does. And there's an image at the top of these of essentially like a man running off with a bag of money, a representation of theft.
Right.
And then also a piece of me, not even a piece, a huge chunk of me was just getting pissed off. Like I was just imagining it being my family. Like, man, if I found out my family was stolen from, I'd want someone to pay. Like, because I just thought about the fact that it's literally because my grandmother purchased the house that I grew up in that I was able to even have that kind of stability.
I'll just point out that Tonika is working with a large group of people. There's a designer for the placards, and historians and researchers. And on the back of the placards, on the back of the sign, there's a map of the neighborhood where you could see the 100 homes in Englewood that were land sale contracts, so you can understand this history.
The scale and enormity.
There's a QR code where you can sort of, see all this information, and a link to a website which tells this vast history. So it exists within a larger context.
It's like the anti-citizen app, right? Because, those are apps that basically warn people to stay out of neighborhoods like Englewood. And here it is saying, you need to be warned by this system of oppression and the air that we all breathe because of it.
So there's one other thing that's on these landmarks that is really important to point out, and it's both explaining it as art and I think as activism. At the bottom of the landmarks, it says, "This crime was never brought to justice. Reparations are due."
I know, right? Reparations are due. That is so powerful.
Yeah, and Tonika, when I asked her, what reparations? She said, listen, I'm the artist. There are other people who are going to help figure this out. She didn't necessarily have prescriptive ideas. She did say that she hoped that maybe the community would own one of these homes and turn it into a community center, an art center. But she talked about this more.
My goal and hope is that this project will encourage or challenge people to think about reparations differently, or maybe just different than what they have been told it can and should be. But just a way to repair the damage that has been done and bring to justice something for these families, but specifically the larger community, because this crime impacted those families as well as their neighbors, the entire neighborhood. And that's the ripple effect of systemic injustice. It doesn't just harm the individual it was perpetrated on, it harms everyone around them.
It's just so fascinating as an art project because, I can imagine some people listening is this really art? I mean, did she just design these activist signs and put them in this neighborhood to call attention to the need for reparations? I think that's a fair question.
So art that exposes a history of injustice, that makes people see it in a new, fresh way, and then also calls for change in the world, tries to catalyze something, tries to bring something else about.
And we, to be fair to her, the signs are a material object, like a photograph, like a painting, like a sculpture. And so, she's engaging in a form of art practice and expression that carries this weight.
And an intervention in a community. I mean, it's in the neighborhood. It's not in a gallery. It's not in a museum. They're in the neighborhood where the scam happened and where she wants to bring about change.
In fact, with all of that, you might even ask the question, I mean, where's the line? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, where is the line between art and activism? And we talked about this, and immediately we thought of another artist to bring into this conversation, Amanda Williams.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to her. She's awesome.
Amanda also does art on the south side of Chicago. She's put up art in those very same neighborhoods in Englewood.
Yeah, Amanda's great. I'm so happy that we're going to be talking to her. she's going to have a lot to say to help us think about this question of the line between art and activism.
I couldn't think of anyone smarter about this topic, about thinking about what can art do as far as correcting injustices. Amanda Williams.
Hey.
Ben Austen.
Man,
How are you?
Thank you for being on
How are
Some
you,
of My Best
Khalil?
Friends Are.
Yes, we are so excited.
This is a huge honor.
So your art project, Colored Theory, took abandoned homes in Englewood, the same neighborhood that Tonika lives in, and you painted them. You gave them love. You made them stand out in these dramatic ways. And the colors you chose were, you could say, culturally relevant colors. It was stunning.
How white have you been? She painted the homes in Harold Chicken Shack color.
Royal Crown. Crown Royal.
Yeah, like that's right. I mean, culturally relevant. Come on, man.
Ultra sheen.
Ultra sheen. I love it. Like
Ultra sheen.
What is the color? It's like cyan. Is that what it is?
No, it's ultra sheen.
Yeah, man. See? You've been hanging out with me too much.
All right, touche.
Yeah.
If you want to technically, it's a turquoise green side of cyan.
You know, I was just trying to give a little bit of context to our listener who may not know what ultra sheen is.
It's ultra sheen.
And Harold's Chicken Shack is
Right,
red, right?
for the listening
a really
audience.
brilliant color of red. Yes.
So we grew up on Harold's Chicken in Chicago. It's a franchise. It's known for its mild sauce, which is red. Khalil and I have both seen pieces of that work in museums here in Chicago and at the MoMA in New York. And, that art project was picked as like one of the 25 most significant works of architecture in the post-war era. I mean, that's incredible.
That's a huge honor. Post-war.
You've been commissioned with another artist to make the Shirley Chisholm sculpture in Prospect Park.
Correct.
And you did this TED Talk about color theory. And my daughter listened to it in her art class this year.
Isn't that something? See?
What?
All the students did.
That's Black excellence.
It's a huge
That's
honor.
Black excellence.
You're touching lives. So Amanda, we've been talking about Tonika Johnson's work and specifically Inequity for Sale.
Yes.
And, we want to hear you talk about art as activism and what that means. And, we've been wrestling with this question in terms of Tonika's work of what role can art play in bringing about social change?
I'm so glad that you guys are having this conversation because it's actually one I've been having by myself, but had then started to have with Tonika. I think her prior project, Folded Map, is one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. And really, I would say is the closest thing I've seen to something that really merges art in whatever way you want to define it, high art, community art, low art, whatever metric you want to use, and an idea about activism and maybe even policy and social change. Even more so, I would say, than color theory. So I did color theory from 2014 to I think about 2016, the totality of the work, the conception of it, the production of the painting of the houses, and then the photographing of that, and then presenting that documentation. And so something like color theory starts to help you see the residue of redlining. So it helps you understand that these things that were done to maps in the 1930s and 40s to decide who could get a loan and who couldn't, and who could live where and who couldn't, though you can feel it if you're from an area like this, you can literally see it because the vacancy is so strange and odd, but we've normalized it. So then when they became these very saturated...
It looks rural.
It looks like Arkansas.
Yeah, people don't know how rural that parts of the South Side look because there's so much abandonment that homes have been cleared. There's just
isolation,
vast open spaces.
And so it really was this kind of oddity where you're like, where is that? It's like, that is 60th and State is where that is. That is right in the heart of the city. This is not the outliers or, this is a demonstration of what it looks like when entities benefit from systemic ways in which people have been isolated and segregated. And so the saturation, the out of context use of those colors, on the one hand, it's a pink house.
Right.
It's a flaming hot orange house, like the starkness of that compared to that empty landscape was something that got people's attention, even living in those areas and neighborhoods. And so I think for me, I thought it was just going to kind of highlight literally the oddity of this geography. One, we would cut the lawn and cut down that kind of overgrown brush, we being my husband. And so people were like, did you guys buy the house? I was like, no. It's like, do you own the house? It's like, no. Does your cousin live there? No. So just the showing of some kind of love to a structure that everybody had kind of cast off for dead also was very striking to people. And I didn't expect that because they're not used to anybody caring for anything for no reason. Yeah. And so these are the things people connected with. And so it gave value to something that had been deemed valueless, and people felt that, and they felt a kind of appreciation that I didn't seem to have some alternate agenda.
Khalil and I have been trying to figure out this relationship between art and activism, and really this question on the art side of like, what can art actually do to bring about change?
So I like to always kind of dispel some romanticized myth that this work like changed the community, or I came in and I transformed what the possibilities of Inglewood are. Is asking, what can this do right now with what we have instead of trying to change everything? So is it equally impactful that like one person came and did something they'd never done before and they felt empowered? Is that more or less empowering than if I get the alderman to, I don't know, change some street sign law or something? I don't know, right? So in terms of scales of participation and activism, where does it fall on that? It's a catalyst. That's where I operate, in catalyst. I'm trying to just spark something that somebody else will do.
I love what you just said about art as a catalyst. And so, I want to circle back to Tonika's work in this project, Inequity for Sale. I mean, it seems to me this is so perfectly in conversation with the work you've already done.
Yeah. And I think this newest work, then literally pinpointing, she's like taking a Yahoo map with those points, and she's brought it to physical life with these stanchions that sit so that you can visually see the kind of, ubiquity of how many people were victims of this situation, but also physically then understanding why a landscape looks a certain way. This is stuff that reparations can come about for. This is official apologies. This is accountability. This is bringing people that don't believe this is a problem to the physical space. So for me, the ability for this as a visual kind of creative art form to then have clear potential impact in an activist sense is super clear in a way that I think most artists operating today that would call themselves social practice or social artists is a little fluff. It's a little bit, there's no, you can't, if it was a science experiment, you couldn't recreate it. This you can recreate is an accountability.
I mean, I know a great deal of what draws me to your work or Tonika's work is that it is actually on the streets. It's in the neighborhood and it's not in a museum. And literally that's where the practice is happening. And what does it mean to be in those spaces? What does it mean in terms of the audience that you reach, in terms of the goals and the effect?
Yeah. When I'm making art that's engaged in an area where people maybe don't really even care about art, then what am I doing it for? And how do I make sure that it's having the same resonance? And so part of that also is an equality or an understanding of like, I'm not coming to like impart some knowledge or some wisdom, or I'm not coming from on high to enlighten. It's like, no, I have a question and I can have a different conversation and get different kinds of answers when I can have that question with people from the neighborhood I grew up in, or I can have with my classmates at Cornell or Lab or wherever these other, or MoMA, or wherever these other spaces that I exist in. And so for me, the challenge is always making sure the work is true to whatever that audience is, and also expansive enough so that I'm not assuming what the audience might or might not be able to receive. So that's pretty complicated.
In addition to everything we've talked about, but you've been part of this exhibition of other architects and designers, and the title of that show was Reconstructions, Architecture and Blackness, and your particular contribution not only is very much about this history of redlining, but it's also about how Black people defied the boundaries that were prescribed for them. And you have this amazing poem where you describe Blackness in so many configurations, contradictions. I mean, it's basically like Black doesn't follow the rules, period, right? Because the rules weren't meant for us.
Correct. to begin with. That is correct.
Exactly.
So why are you worried about following them or not following them?
So MoMA published a book of this show that Stephanie and I saw last year, right when the museum reopened. There are 10 artists featured in this show. Every artist was given a commission to create a work of an object of futurity, a vision of Blackness that could be both historically rooted and future-oriented, or could be all about the future. But it's just an incredible show. And in the catalog for the show, which I am holding right now in my hand, in your essay, the middle of your essay, there is a page in the book that is literally upside down. Like, you cannot read the left side and go to the right side. You have to turn the book right side up in order to finish the page. What's up with that?
It's upside down. Because why do you need to read the book the right way? This was another fight. I was the problem child with the designers. It's like, I want you to be able to turn the book upside down and read it backwards. So everybody go get a copy and then turn the book upside down. And my essay reads perfectly backwards and forwards.
And thinking of Tonika's work, which is very much future thinking.
Yes.
So you do this show. You help to coordinate. You're like the lead artist that helps to bring all of this together to MoMA. And you issue a manifesto. I wanted you to talk about the manifesto because I think that's in direct conversation with Tonika and thinking about the future and what is owed.
Well, I won't take full credit. Sean Anderson and Mabel Wilson were the curators that really had the vision. But this is the first show at MoMA, and one of the first shows ever that directly contends with an idea about architecture and Blackness. So we developed this group called the Black Reconstruction Collective, made of the original 10 of us that were in exhibition. Yeah. And so this group was basically going to say, we refuse this idea that we have to make the work in this way, that we can't advocate for ourselves. And we send it back to MoMA. And this starts a storm of a legal department and a so-and-so department, a development department. And so then we understood a kind of power and collectivity that we knew intuitively, but we didn't really understand how big of a deal this was going to be. And so then we had to stand firm on this idea that we need to formulate an entity that doesn't allow this to happen again to anybody else that looks like us. And we want to be a steward of making sure that other people that want to have ideas about Black people in space don't have to deal with this part of it.
I want to read just two sentences from the manifesting statement because I remember seeing it on the wall and I thought to myself, this may be one of the most radical things I've read anywhere, let alone entering a gallery of an elite art museum. And so here's just two sentences from the second paragraph. You guys write, the Black Reconstruction Collective commits itself to continuing this work of reconstruction in Black America and these United States. We take up the question of what architecture can be, not a tool for imperialism and subjugation, not a means for aggrandizing the self, but a vehicle for liberation and joy. And that is just so much encapsulates Tonika's work and your work of liberation and joy.
And joy.
And so many of the other artists who appeared in that show. We are just blown away by you, your work, all that you have done and will do.
Thank you. This has been a huge honor.
I'm so excited for Tonika's work. It actually launches this month, November 2021. So some of my best friends is breaking news here.
Breaking news, that's right.
For these landmarks to be all over the place in Englewood. And, to point out this injustice that has happened, to bring attention to this theft of property, and, to help us think about what might come next. What do you do with this information?
Well, I mean, again, what Amanda so graciously embraced is that there's all kinds of ways to express things. And it can be abstract in the kind of painting something in colors that evoke redlining, which was all about different colors of which homes deserved support and financing and which homes didn't. And in Tonika's work, there is this, invitation to passersby to come and learn something about what they're actually seeing through this art expression, through these landmarks, through these signs. I learned so much, and also am so inspired by how much artists play a role in teaching us and telling the truth about the society we live in.
Yeah. I love that their work is in conversation with our hometown, with our city of Chicago, with journalism, with history. It's fabulous. So
yeah.
I'm glad we got to talk about this and look at it.
That's right. And I think we should definitely nominate them to be some of our best friends.
Oh, man. They're already in.
All right, man. Love you.
Love you too.
Some of My Best Friends Are is a production of Pushkin Industries. The show is written and hosted by me, Khalil Gibran Muhammad, and my best friend, Ben Austen.
It's produced by Cher Vincent and edited by Karen Shakurji. Our engineer is Martine Gonzalez. Our associate editor is Keishel Williams. Our associate producer is Lucy Sullivan. And our showrunner is Sasha Matthias.
Our executive producers are Lital Molad and Mia LaBelle.
Special thanks to Tonika Johnson and Amanda Williams. Man, they are both fantastic artists from the south side of Chicago. We are so happy to have learned from them and to be in conversation with them. And also special thanks to the National Public Housing Museum, where Tonika is an artist as instigator. We're ready for our next class.
At Pushkin, thanks to Heather Fain, Carly Migliori, John Schnars, and Jacob Weisberg.
Our theme song, Little Lily, is by fellow Chicagoan Avery R. Young from his amazing album Tubman. You will definitely want to check out more of his music at his website, averyryoung.com.
You can find Pushkin on all social platforms at Pushkin Pods, and you can sign up for our newsletter at pushkin.fm. To find more Pushkin podcasts, listen on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen.
If you love Some of My Best Friends Are, and any of the other shows from Pushkin Industries, consider subscribing to Pushkin Plus.
Pushkin Plus is a podcast subscription that offers bonus content and uninterrupted listening for $4.99 a month.
Look for Pushkin Plus on Apple Podcast subscriptions.
And so next time I'm home, Harold's Chicken on me.
Which one? You have to say the number.
The one, you know what? That's 82. Funny because I don't actually. I don't remember the one on 53rd. What's the number on 53rd in Kimberg, Ben?
It doesn't have a number, actually. I don't think.
Yeah. Is it still there?
It is still there. I don't think it has a number.